Before kings and crowns, a star split the sky. From its fire rose giants, gods to some, tyrants to others. One ruled above them all, the fallen Alpha. His shadow shaped dynasties, his silence bent empires. Now, step into the forbidden tale, and when it ends, rate the story 1 to 10, so the dynasty may rise again in fire and blood.
The night the Alpha star fell, the heavens tore apart. A roar unlike thunder split the sky. Across kingdoms, men looked up in terror as a river of fire streaked downward. The star blazed like a burning crown, casting shadows even at midnight. When it struck the heart of the jungle, the earth quaked as though gods had been torn from their thrones. For days, flames devoured the land. Rivers vanished, mountains burned. And when the fire calmed, the world was no longer as men had known it. From the crater's molten heart rose giants, taller than trees, their skin cast in bronze, their veins glowing like molten rivers of the fallen star itself. They walked with the silence of storms, their eyes carrying a hunger not of this world. Among them, one rose higher, broader, more terrible in beauty than all the rest. First in whispers, then in cries of fear, his name was spoken. The first Titan, the fallen Alpha. His every step bent branches, his every breath churned the wind. And when he looked upon men, their knees broke beneath them, not from command, but from awe. Raw, unshakable awe. Kings trembled. Dynasties that had endured wars and plagues bent low before him. They brought gold, women, blood, not from loyalty, but from terror. And the fallen Alpha, silent, received their gifts without asking. He forged no throne. He claimed no crown. His presence alone unraveled empires. But men are not made to bow forever.
In their palaces, kings whispered, "How long before this Alpha takes more than tribute? How long before his hand closes around our crowns?" Fear twisted into envy, envy into schemes. Some spoke of the seal of dominion, a relic buried in the crater, pulsing like a black heart, said to hold command over the giants. Others prayed the Alpha's hunger would consume him before he consumed them. Yet even in their plotting, they could not meet his gaze. For when the fallen Alpha's eyes swept over the courts of men, the proudest kings felt their blood turn to ash. The dynasty of men had not yet fallen, but it had already begun to rot. For the star that split the sky birthed not only giants, but the prophecy of a new order. The star's crater lay a relic, a black stone pulsing like a heart, said to be the seal of dominion. Whoever held it could command not just the giants, but the bloodline of Alphas themselves. To touch it, however, meant to carry the curse of eternal hunger, for war, for blood, for desire. The fallen Alpha refused the seal, fearing its corruption. But kings and queens across empires plotted for it, sending assassins, scholars, even priests. None returned whole. The seal waited, whispering, promising that one day it would bind both giants and men. The jungle's scar still smoked where the Alpha Star had torn open the earth. At its deepest wound lay a stone unlike any known to men, black as obsidian, yet alive, pulsing like a rhythm like the beat of a colossal heart. The air around it bent with heat, and those who dared draw near swore they heard whispers, voices that did not speak with tongues, but with fire sliding into the marrow of their bones. This was the relic of the fallen star, the seal of dominion.
Legends spread swiftly through kingdoms. Whoever dared touch the seal would gain dominion over the giants, not only their bodies, but their blood. It was said the stone carried the first breath of the Alpha Star itself, a breath that could bind titans or break them. Kings, desperate to steady trembling thrones, dreamed of it. Queens, cunning in their silks, imagined commanding the blood of alphas to birth heirs stronger than gods. But with power came warning. Those who touched the seal were cursed to hunger forever. Hunger for battle, hunger for blood, hunger for desire so consuming it could turn kingdoms into ash for a single taste. The fallen Alpha stood before it once, when the fire of the star still smoked against his bronze skin. The whispers curled toward him, promising a throne higher than the sky. But he did not kneel, he did not touch. His scarred hand hovered, then withdrew. For even he feared the corruption waiting within, born of the star, yet trembling at its heart. But men are seldom wise. Assassins crept into the crater at night. Their bodies were hollowed. Scholars came with scrolls and spells, but their minds shattered like clay. Priests chanted prayers older than empires, only to vanish into ash. Still, the seal waited, pulsing, patient, its whispers growing louder across callus and crater alike. It promised crowns, empires, lovers eternal. It promised one day a hand, reckless or desperate, would claim it. And so it remained a heart of darkness in the jungle. Even the fallen Alpha felt its hum, though he turned away. The star had not only birthed titans, it had left behind a hunger, one that would consume dynasties, and the bloodline of the Alpha itself.
In the palace of Karun, Princess Soraya was praised as if she were scripture. Poets compared her skin to dawn and her eyes to rivers that drew men to drown. Yet she was no more free than a caged bird dressed in gold. Her future had been bartered away to a rival dynasty. Her hand promised not for love, but for the brittle peace of two kingdoms. Every smile she offered in the court was rehearsed. Every jewel she wore was a shackle. Beneath her silks, her heart beat like a prisoner pounding on stone. But fate does not always bow to kings. One evening, as storms gathered over the jungle, her carriage rolled along the hunting road, wheels rimmed in gold, guards riding ahead. The sky split open with fire, thunder like drums of war. Horses screamed as the carriage overturned in the mud. Gilded wood cracked, jewels scattered, and Soraya, wrapped in chains of ceremonial gold, was cast into the wild. Rain drove into her skin, blinding her eyes, yet she stumbled forward into roots as thick as towers. It was there, in the hush between thunderclaps, that she felt it. a presence that bent the very air around her. From the shadows stepped the fallen Alpha. His skin shimmered faintly, as though embers of the star still glowed beneath his flesh. His veins pulsed with firelight, and his breath rolled across the earth like the toll of war drums. He loomed above her, immense, terrible, yet unbearably alive. Soraya froze. Chains clung to her wrists and ankles, dragging her down like a sacrifice at his feet. For a single heartbeat, time stood still. It was not princess and titan who faced one another, but two hungers, ancient, nameless, recognizing themselves in the silence. His eyes, bronze pools lit by inner fire, locked onto hers, and for the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not as a jewel to be paraded, but as flesh, as pulse, as need. Then lightning split the sky. Voices of her guards called her name. The storm tore her back into their arms, dragged her from the roots, from him. Yet even as they rushed her toward the shattered carriage, Soraya did not look away. His gaze followed, carving itself into her soul like a brand. Days later, fate mocked her again. The kingdom of Karun prepared tribute for the fallen Alpha as it had for years. Silks, gold, and bodies dressed for offering. Among them, veiled in radiance, Soraya was paraded like a jewel before him.
When his gaze found hers, the world vanished. The hall was filled with courtiers, kings, and whispers, but none of it mattered. His eyes pierced the veils, the silks, the gold, stripping her bare. He looked not as men look upon beauty, with desire mixed with possession, but as a storm devours land, hungry, relentless, inevitable. In that instant, her breath stilled. The memory of the jungle thunder returned. The roots, the rain, his shadow. Now, there was no storm to scatter them, no guards to drag her away. Desire, raw and forbidden, coiled between them. Like fire beneath the floor of the world. For the first time, the fallen Alpha's gaze was not filled with war. It burned with something far more dangerous. Hunger for a woman. Hunger for her.
They met again where the storm had first thrown them together. The jungle was damp, the earth breathing heat, the old roots arching like a secret temple. Soraya reached for him, her fingers tracing the scars on his bronze skin. Each one felt alive, humming with the fire of battles older than kingdoms. His breath shook the air between them, heavy, deep, as though the whole forest moved with him. Then he lifted her. With one sweep of his arms, she was in the air, weightless against his chest. Her chains clinked softly as her silks slid from her shoulders, leaving her skin bare to his burning touch. He pressed her into the roots, his body a wall of heat pinning her against the cool bark. His mouth found hers, not gentle, but consuming. His kiss stole her breath, his tongue conquering her, leaving her gasping. When he broke away, his lips trailed lower, biting her throat, tasting the rise of her sweetness. She moaned, her body betraying the fear that trembled inside her. Her thighs shook against him. She tried to pull herself closer, but she could not contain him. He was too vast, too other. Instead, he guided her, touching her until her breath broke in small cries. Then, he drew closer. At first, it was impossible, too much.
She clawed at his shoulders, her voice breaking, but he did not stop, and her body gave way, slowly, painfully, beautifully. When he moved with her, it was as though the star's fire itself had entered her flesh. His rhythm shook her, every surge a storm breaking through her bones. She clung to him, her body caught between agony and rapture, her voice lost in his mouth. The jungle seemed to tremble with them, roots shuddering, branches quivering, as if the earth itself bore witness. Her release struck like lightning, fierce and sudden, her body arching, shaking, crying out into his kiss. And when he followed, roaring, pouring himself into Aya with the fury of the fallen star, she felt as though she was being remade, burned, and born again in his fire. In the silence after, she lay trembling in his arms, no longer princess, no longer chained. He was no longer Titan, no longer God. They were only man and woman, undone together beneath the roots of the jungle.
Whispers slithered through palace halls like smoke. Servants spoke of the princess who no longer slept, whose skin burned with fever, though no illness touched her, whose steps echoed too lightly for a woman said to be with child. Court physicians pressed cold hands to her wrists, only to feel her pulse racing like a drum of war. Guards confessed in hushed tones that her strength unsettled them. One claimed she struck his arm in jest, and the bruise lingered black. For days, the prophecy returned, not in books, but in trembling mouths. The child of alpha blood will inherit both strength and curse. Some called it a blessing. Others, a doom waiting to rip the world in two. Rival dynasties stirred. Messengers came with scrolls sealed in crimson wax, demanding the princess be examined, her womb measured, her blood tested. To deny was treason. To comply was worse. Softly, Soraya wrapped herself in veils of gold silk, her figure hidden, her secret swelling beneath cloth and shadow. She smiled in silence at every demand, but inside, her heart trembled like a bird against a cage. And yet, in the jungle, beneath the roots that had witnessed their sin, the fallen alpha held her differently. His hands, which once crushed iron, now curved gently across the roundness growing in her belly. "No king will touch what is mine," he whispered against her skin. "No priest will bind what the star has given us. If they reach for you, Soraya, I will burn their thrones to ash." Her breath shook at his vow. She feared him, feared what he was capable of. And yet, a part of her craved that promise. For in his arms, she was no longer the caged jewel of Karun. She was the bearer of a destiny that made empires tremble. And still, the jungle seemed to listen. Each night, as they lay tangled in fire and shadow, she felt the child stir within her, not gently, not humanly, but with a strength that made her gasp. The relic in the crater pulsed at the same rhythm, a black heart echoing the heartbeat inside her womb. The kingdom schemed, the giants whispered, and Soraya, cloaked in silks and secrecy, carried within her the truth that could shatter both.
The king of Karun sat upon his jeweled throne, his face carved into stone, but inside him swirled rot and fury. A father, a ruler, a man choking on the scent of shame his daughter had brought upon his name. For days, he had worn the mask of silence, feigning blindness to her swelling belly and the strange glow that clung to her like a curse. But silence in dynasties was never peace. It was war,
sharpening its knives. That dusk, he summoned the court. Gold lanterns dripped light across marble floors, tables heavy with fruit, roasted meats, and wine that shimmered like blood under fire. Seraya entered, draped in ivory silk, her pulse hammering at her throat. Behind her, the fallen Alpha strode. No chains, no crown, but a presence that made even kings tremble. His scars caught the firelight like constellations, each one a story carved by pain. The king raised a goblet, his lips curving in a smile that never touched his eyes. For peace, for family, for Karun. The Alpha lifted the cup, the scent sharp, strange, too sweet for true wine. But before he could taste, the shadows stirred. From behind columns, iron-chained giants emerged, towering men with skin painted in ash, warriors purchased with promises of gold and vengeance. Their chains rattled like war drums. The betrayal struck in unison. Blades flashed, wine spilled like blood. The Alpha's roar shattered the hall, stone trembling as though the earth itself bowed to his fury. His body ignited, bronze skin searing with the fire of the fallen star, muscles swelling with power no mortal army could bind. The changed giants lunged, but their blades bent against his flesh. Their roars were drowned in his, a sound older than kingdoms, older than kings. The king faltered, his cup tumbling, red spilling across his robes like prophecy fulfilled. He fell to his knees, crown slipping, his trembling hands outstretched. Mercy, for the blood we share through her. Mercy. But mercy was dead in the Alpha's veins. Betrayal had salted it, burned it, buried it beneath centuries of exile. His eyes glowed with the fire of extinction, fixed not on the king's trembling frame, but on the silk curtains where Seraya stood frozen. She pressed her hand against her belly, her womb heavy with the secret that could topple empires. And in that heartbeat, she understood. Her father had not simply betrayed her lover. He had declared war on her unborn child. The Alpha's voice thundered, low and final. You chose your throne over your blood. Then watch your throne turn to ash. The hall filled with fire.
The fallen Alpha no longer spoke the language of protector. His voice thundered with a new creed, conqueror. From the shadowed valleys where the mist clung to bone and stone, the giants answered his call. Beasts that had bent their spines beneath chains now lifted war hammers in his name. Tribes long silenced by Karun's crown knelt, not in worship, but in vengeance. The drums of rebellion shook mountains. Banners stitched in blood rose against kingdoms that had once called themselves eternal. Cities fell like wheat to the scythe. Walls turned to rubble. Crowns turned to cinders. The scent of smoke and iron blanketed the horizon, a funeral shroud for empires that had mocked the prophecy. And within the inferno, Seraya stood, both trembling and radiant. She was not merely his lover now. She was his queen, veiled in firelight, the forbidden jewel he carried into every throne room he burned. She felt terror when she saw children pressed into exile, when screams rose with the crack of burning beams.
yet ecstasy when his shadow fell across her, when his hand dragged her close, when his lips silenced her doubts with a hunger no crown could contain. Every victory ended in her arms. His body, still marked by battle, would collapse against hers, sweat, blood, and longing blurring until she could no longer tell which bound them tighter, war or love. Each time his mouth found hers, it was not tenderness but conquest. The same fury he unleashed upon kings poured into her presence until she gasped his name like a prayer. And in turn, she gave him surrender, not as a captive, but as a queen who knew she was the flame in the center of his storm. But passion was no longer innocent. It had sharpened, darkened. His touch bore the weight of kingdoms destroyed. Her kisses tasted of ash and prophecy. Love had become the chain they both dragged through the battlefield. She bound by devotion, he shackled by desire. And still they drowned, together, in the war born of a single forbidden touch.
The jungles burned red as kingdoms crumbled, but a deeper fire was stirring, one hidden in Soraya's womb. Her child, still unborn, pulsed with a rhythm that made the very air tremble. At night, she clutched her belly, feeling sparks in her veins, as though a second heartbeat drummed inside her. Not human, not giant, but something beyond both. Then came the ambush. Blades glimmered from the shadows, and the queen's silk was stained with her own blood. Her cry shook the battlefield, and with it, the world itself tore open. Far away, in the crater where the Alpha Star had first fallen, the seal of dominion shuddered. Cracks split its black surface, veins of fire glowing like molten rivers. Lightning screamed across the heavens, striking not once, but in endless succession, jagged fangs biting into earth and sky alike. The voice returned, the same voice that had ridden the star when it split the sky, the voice of the Alpha's doom. It was not sound, but a vibration that shook bone, that turned language into ash in the mouth of kings and giants alike. Giants bent unwillingly to their knees, howling as their will was stolen. Humans bled without blade, their bodies breaking under a weight they could not see. Armies collapsed in chaos, as if dragged by unseen chains toward the crater's glow. The fallen Alpha roared in fury, but the roar was met with silence from the woman he loved. His greatest fear had risen. The child she carried was not his salvation. Their union, their rebellion, their hunger, it had not carved a new destiny, but broken open an ancient one. The seal was never meant to sleep forever. Their love had not merely defied kingdoms. It had summoned the storm that even gods had once chained. And now, the storm was awake.
The child did not slip into the world as mortals do. He ripped it open. Born in a storm of blood and fire, his first cry rolled across mountains, splitting stone, scattering flocks, and silencing the jungle's creatures. Even the giants stilled, their towering bodies trembling as if something greater had just stepped among them. He was no infant of flesh alone. His skin shimmered faintly with the bronze glow of his father's kind, yet his bones bore the delicate lines of men. In his gaze burned not innocence, but the hunger of the fallen star itself, a fire unquenchable, wild, and terrifying. His small lungs exhaled heat like embers, and when his fingers curled, sparks licked the air. The court whispered that this was not a child, but a curse incarnate. Neither man nor giant, neither salvation nor heir. A bridge, yes, but one between life and ruin. Priests trembled, their scrolls unraveling in terror. Prophecies long buried were spoken aloud once more. The blood of Alpha, once mixed with mortal, shall unseal the endless war. To love him is to burn, to follow him is to fall. Saraya defied them all. With her body still weak from birth, she clutched her son to her breast, wrapping him in silks to shield his glow from hungry eyes. Every suckle drew fire into her veins. Every heartbeat against her chest felt like she was nursing not just a child, but a storm. Her dynasty demanded blood. They called for the boy's death before his first month, declaring him an abomination that would bring ruin upon kingdoms. The fallen Alpha's answer was a roar that shattered palace walls. No blade, no king, no priest shall touch what is mine. He held his son high, bronze muscles slick with sweat and fury, his voice breaking the air like thunder. Yet when the child's eyes met his, something inside the Alpha faltered. For within those burning irises, he saw not only life, but a mirror of his deepest fear. This was no heir to peace, no seed of unity. This was fire clothed in flesh, a being born not to build, but to break. The Alpha swore to protect him, but in the cavern of his heart, a shadow whispered the truth. The boy was not an heir of crowns, but the inheritor of war eternal.
The world cracked like old stone under the weight of prophecy. The dynasty of Karun tore itself apart, kings strangled in their own halls, crowns rolling from blood-soaked altars, queens fleeing with children who would never sit their promised thrones. Across the valleys, the clans of giants split, some swearing to the fallen Alpha, others rising in rebellion, their roars shaking mountains. Cities that once sent gold as tribute now smoldered as ash, their rivers blackened with corpses. At the heart of it stood the fallen Alpha, his bronze skin streaked with battle fire, his hand clenching a sword that seemed too small for his wrath. At his side, Saraya's silks fluttered in winds torn from burning towers, her arms cradling the child whose cry had birthed this ruin. She was no longer just princess, nor queen. She was flame itself, the mother of a new age. The prophecy had not lied. Loyalty to one woman had undone the old order. Yet even as empires shattered, whispers rose in the smoke. They spoke of the child's gaze, those starlit eyes that saw deeper than any king's ambition. In them was no mere end. In them was a seed. The child was no crown heir, but of fire heir. Not the last of kingdoms, but the first of something unmeasured. His blood carried the hunger of the Alpha star, and his breath carried the promise of dawn. The fallen Alpha pressed his lips to Saraya's temple, his voice rough as cracked stone. The world is broken, but through him it will rise again. Not in their names, but in ours.